The New Jersey Pinelands Commission is celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Pinelands Comprehensive Management Plan. And I'm here today with Steve Ford, who worked as an editor and public affairs coordinator for the Pinelands Commission from 1979 until 1981. Prior to joining the commission, he was a reporter and then the Metro editor at the Trenton Times. After leaving the commission, Mr. Ford worked as an editor for the News and Observer in Raleigh, North Carolina. He was promoted to editorial page editor in 1989 and wrote editorials and a weekly column until his retirement in 2012. He currently serves as a volunteer with the North Carolina Council of Churches, where he reports and comments on state government and policy issues. Thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome. Glad to be here.
Great. So you were a reporter and editor in New Jersey in the 1970s. What spurred your interest in the Pinelands, and how did you end up working for the Pinelands Commission?
Well, part of that time as a reporter, I was in the State House Bureau. I was covering the legislature and politics, and of course, you're kind of involved with. You get tangentially involved, I guess, at least with environmental issues doing that. And I was just developing an interest in environmental affairs in general. And actually, my last reporting beat was as the Trenton Times environmental reporter, and then after that, I took a different fork in the road and went into editing. But I had this interest in environmental affairs, and meanwhile, I had come across John McPhee's book on the Pine Barrens, which was just a real eye opener. I mean, besides it being great reporting and writing, it was it's right in your back door, right out the back door, and so I poked around in the pine some, and then lo and behold, the decision was made to create the Pinelands Commission, and this just seemed like something that would be a good project to take a flyer on. And I was ready to try something else for a while. I wasn't convinced that I wanted to make the newspaper industry my career. I thought I'd give something else a whirl, and so I raised my hand and got picked.
Sure. Well, you dove right into a big project, and that being editing and working on the Pinelands Comprehensive Management Plan. And I've spoken with a number of your colleagues who worked on the Pinelands Comprehensive Management Plan 4 decades ago, and they called the process exciting and grueling, while noting the long hours, but the unwavering dedication of the staff. How would you describe that time?
Well, I would agree with that, and I'd also like to. Over the the gap of time here, I'd like to say hey to those former friends and colleagues of mine who. It's been a while since I've seen any of them. Bobby Zampella was kind enough to drop me a note when I did retire from the newspaper world, and so in particular, here's to you, sir. Hope life's treating you well. But as to that experience back then, yes, it was exciting. It was grueling. I came at it from a little different perspective from the folks like Bobby and Mike Boland and Alice and Terry Moore, people like that, who were either heavily involved on the scientific side or the planning side, or both. But from my perspective, once it got into the meat of the production of the plan, that really was what I focused on, and what was the primary task that faced me. And looking back at it, one thing that's remarkable was that we pulled all that material together without benefit of any computer programs. There was no word processing software. A lot of that stuff was written out in longhand, and I spent many long hours at my kitchen table at night with a pile of manuscripts, copy editing by hand with my big old copy pencil, and I wound up with a big old knot on my finger to prove how much time I'd spent with that pencil. But that's the way it had to be done, and it was intense. There was a tight timetable, and of course there was a tricky political landscape that had to be worked through with all these decisions being made, and and looking back, it was really a pretty amazing process. And I have to say that people such as Terry Moore and the leaders on the commission who mapped this process out and led it and made sure that it succeeded. It was an amazing feat.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and when I speak to some of your colleagues and some of the ones you've mentioned, and I've had the pleasure of interviewing, they noted your skill and ability to take all these different writing styles and people with different backgrounds and different disciplines and weave it all together into a cohesive document. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, that's very kind of them to say so, and I appreciate that that's the way they came away with it. But because that's what they came away with. But yes, I think that there were writers with different styles and different approaches, and I wasn't trying to impose any sort of a strict regimen on folks, but I thought it would be best if the material had a fairly consistent take to it, a consistent tone, and I basically just wanted to avoid jargon. I wanted the material to be clear, straightforward. I also wanted the writer's own expertise and enthusiasm to come through, and so I tried to make sure that people had plenty of running room in their writing, and on the whole, I think it came across pretty well in that regard, and I'm glad that those folks agreed. And in hindsight, a lot of very technical things that had to be worked through, and those were challenging. But you look at the plan. If some of that material is still circulating, I think it's very rich. It's detailed. It's descriptive, and you just couldn't ask for I don't think a better summation of what makes the Pinelands so special.
Sure. Do you ever look back on it now? Do you read the plan now? Do you ever read passages from it just for fun?
I dip into it from time to time because I think it is some pretty good reading. I used to enjoy, just in terms of the things that I enjoyed, in particular, I enjoyed the sections with all the scientific names and common names of all the species, birds, plants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
Somebody with a naturalist bent could really appreciate that, and just all the descriptive and well-grounded material about it talked about all the water resources, the soils, and then you had the historical background, cultural background. It was just so rich, and so I would say I do enjoy looking back to it from time to time, and then of course one of the big challenges, as you well know, were all the decisions that had to be made in terms of regulation of development, and that raised legal issues, it raised political issues, and a lot of those issues were ones that spilled over into my work in North Carolina for the state capital paper, the News and Observer. Where issues of urban sprawl, for example, were covered. Again, development regulation of agricultural activities. North Carolina, of course, has a huge industrial hog farming sector, and which has raised many environmental problems. And my newspaper won a Pulitzer Prize for its coverage of environmental impacts of the hog industry, and I did a lot of writing and commentary that related to that. And my background at the Pinelands Commission in terms of the threats to water resources and how regulations could be deployed to help come to grips with those, all of that was a good springboard for me.
So as you look back now, as we're about to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Comprehensive Management Plan. What are you most proud of about your work on the plan and your work at the commission?
Well, I'm proud when I look at that completed document and reflect that I played a role in pulling it all together under what had to be described as adverse circumstances. But I was able to play a role and work with these very skilled, talented, dedicated folks on the staff who were all themselves pressed to the limit and trying to make this thing succeed. And so I became part of that team to an extent, and I am proud of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm proud of what the plan has meant for that very special region of our country, really.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, thank you very much for your time today. It was very nice talking to you. Thank you.
I'm glad to have had a chance to do it.
All right. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.